Hello everyone, welcome to SwitchUp. My name is Glen and today we're going to look at some of the games coming out on the Nintendo eShop next week. I've got 10 games here for us to look at, a couple of which there's been some hype around, some interesting looking indies, and a few that, in all honesty, will probably fall into obscurity not long after they launch. So which is which? Well, let's find out. Coming out on the 5th then, you have 51 Worldwide Games, or Clubhouse Games as it's known in some regions, and this is of course from Nintendo themselves. As the title would suggest, this brings together 51 games. I believe it's actually 51 plus a piano application as well, and there are a variety of famous card and parlour games included. I actually really like the look of this one. I love how each game looks different. Even with a game as simple as this, it still seems to have that love, care and attention that Nintendo always put into their games. And with 51 of them available, I'm sure most people would find a good few of them to their liking. It's going for £34.99 on the eShop or your regional equivalent, but you can find it cheaper than this already physically, and that's how I'll be picking it up for sure.
Chess, shogi, mini shogi, ludo, Riichi Mahjong, sevens, golf, darts, Texas Hold'em, nine men's Morris, air hockey, war, carom, Chinese checkers, yacht dice, takoyaki.
The next game then, and quite possibly the most anticipated for the week, this is The Outer Worlds, a game which came out in October last year on Windows, Xbox One and the PS4. This is a science fiction RPG which plays from a first person perspective and sees you awakening from hypersleep decades after you should have done and finding yourself in the middle of a conspiracy threatening the Halcyon colony. You will be getting yourself involved in combat, but can also use stealth or your social skills to try and get past people, and will also be gaining experience points to learn new skills as you go. Now Mark is doing a performance review of this one for us and it will be up before this video, so I'll put a link to it in the top pinned comment to see whether the port to the Switch has been successful or not. Next up then, another science fiction game, albeit a very cheap and cheerful one this time. This is called They Came From The Sky. Now this looks to be an arcade high score chaser with Game Boy type graphics and sells for £2.69, although there's 63% off this price at the minute, up until the 30th of June in fact, which means at launch it will be going for just 99p. Now I am a huge fan of 1950s science fiction. The classic flying saucers, the radioactive bugs that have grown to huge sizes. In fact, one of my favourite films comes from that era and is The Forbidden Planet. So I've actually already pre-purchased this one for that price of £1. It's worth a punt for that price, to be honest, and hopefully it'll be decent.
Strikes without warning. Today, it's destroying your city. Tomorrow, the world.
Next then is a game called Bridge Strike, which is a vertical shooter, but having just read the description on the eShop, it sounds like it has a few tricks up its sleeve to differentiate it from similar games in the genre. First of all, you need to destroy your enemies without being detected, and it also mentions a weather cycle as you play as well. You'll also need to be careful not to crash into parts of the environment as you play, and it actually sounds quite similar to a game that was on the Atari called River Raid. I don't know if it was inspired by that game at all, but it really does remind me of it, in terms of the gameplay mechanics and the basic art style as well, I suppose. Again, if you like arcade type games, then this one may well be for you, and it's selling for a fairly decent price of £6.29 or your regional equivalent. Coming out on the 6th of June, we have a game called Potato Fairy Flower. I always thought a potato looked like this, to be honest, but there you go. Or maybe it's patata, that's what they say, isn't it? You say one, I say the other. Anyway, this is a puzzle platformer with quite an interesting art style. The characters look as if they've been hand-drawn, whereas the backgrounds look more painted. There seems to be a mixture of basic platforming as well as puzzling elements that take the form of what look like minigames, judging by the screenshots at least. And it has been out on Steam since December last year as well, where it has garnered generally favourable reviews. This has a 25% discount if you pre-order, and as I said, releases on the 6th of June. Next then we have Demons Tier Plus, which is a dungeon RPG roguelike. It boasts 2-player local co-op, procedural generation, as you would expect I suppose in a roguelike, and also has a twin-stick shooting element to it as well. It has a pixel art style and chiptune music, a variety of upgrades to choose from as you play, and to be fair, it looks really nice. It has that stylised 8-bit look to it, which reminds you of a previous generation but wouldn't have been possible back in the day. It's been out on Steam for a little while now and is selling for a good price. It's just whether it can compete with a lot of the other roguelites that are already on the Switch, because there are, let's be fair, a lot of them, and some good ones too at that. Perhaps if you've played this one before, you can let us know in the comments if it's any good. Next then, releasing on the 9th of June, we have 1971 Project Helios. This is a turn-based strategy game which combines military tactics and close combat. It tells the story of 8 characters, each with their own personal agenda, but them having to join forces to try and find somebody. It mentions that there are 3 possible endings, with the determining factor as to which one you get being the decisions you make along the way and the way that your characters interact in that time. It's going for quite a high price point at £35.99, and I think this one's getting a physical release as well. I'll double check and confirmation will be with the prices. But again, the turn-based strategy or tactics genre is one that's quite overcrowded on the Switch, so it's whether it's got enough about it to stand out. As far as I can see, this is a new release coming to all platforms this week, so it hasn't been released anywhere else before. If I am wrong about that though, please do let us know in the comments. Next is a game called Project Warlock, which is a first-person shooter, very much in the vein of classic games such as Doom and Heretic. This one's got quite an interesting story behind it. It came out about 18 months ago on Windows and was actually initially created by an 18-year-old who had been introduced to games such as Doom by his dad and preferred a lot of the elements that you find in those games to those of modern shooters that he'd been playing. The game evolved over time and eventually he had a small team working with him to create the game that is now going to release on consoles. You take on the role of a warlock and have both weapons and magic at your disposal to defeat the enemies, and the game has a fairly decent Metacritic score of 78.
Armed with skills and spells to challenge the evil. Let's walk into hell, you and I.
Next is another game that's been out elsewhere for a little while, and a game that's had good scores wherever else it's been. This is Ancestors Legacy. This is a real-time strategy game where you can take charge of one of 4 nations and will need to base build and resource manage, as well as raiding and pillaging your enemies. From what I've read of this game, whilst it is still a fully fledged RTS, it does streamline certain aspects, not in terms of dumbing it down, but just in terms of not overwhelming you with a deluge of information. As always, it will depend how it comes across on the Switch, but if this one does come across well, this could be well worth picking up. All things being well, I will try to get a review for this one out for next week. And the final game for the week then is a game called Evans Remains. This game looks for all the world to be a visual novel of some description, but having watched the trailer it seems to be more of a puzzle platformer, although it does mention in the description that there are visual novel elements in terms of the narrative, so it'll be interesting to see how those merge together. The game describes itself as a mystery thriller and sees you trying to find a missing boy, of course named Evan. It has a really vibrant art style and sells for a very decent price, so it's just, again as I say, whether it can merge the 2 elements it mentions into a well-rounded package. So that's it for this week then. After last week's mega releases, this week was always going to feel a bit like after the Lord Mayor's show, but with a couple of bigger releases and a few that I would certainly class as interesting enough to at least give a second look to, it's not a bad week at all to be fair. Anyway, a quick thank you to our patrons as always for your continued support, and to each and every one of you for watching our videos. Take care, stay safe, and until next time, happy gaming.